So set the stage for us a little bit. The sukkah in your family's home in
Yeah,
Brooklyn, and you were saying who the crew was that were
yeah.
the regulars.
There was a regular crew that would come to our sukkah. Um, there was, in terms of chazanim, there was Willie Buckchester,
Mhm,
who came, always came,
mhm.
and Perele Feig came, and they sat on away from each other as much as humanly possible.
Uh-huh.
In my experience, there was something going on there. They didn't like each
Okay,
other.
so it's interesting that you said because when I spoke to Gaina and Bianca, they specifically said that Perla and Buckchester were fast friends. They were very close to each other.
I know, and I heard that from Gaina, and that kind of shocked me.
Huh. Do
So
you think there was a
it
rupture
might have
or a
been a
break?
rupture
Uh-huh.
at some point.
Now, were they related to each other in any way? Family circles and connected, or
Not that I know of.
was Perla in a cantorial family? Did she have a
Well, her brother,
the choir director?
yeah,
So,
yeah, her brother, probably taught her some stuff.
mhm.
Uh,
But was he? So tell me a little bit about her brother. Did you know him as well?
I didn't know
Well, his
I
brother,
didn't
Yo,
Feig. Yeah,
Jack,
I
yeah.
didn't know the brother. Never met him.
Oh,
Uh, she didn't learn music, but she did a system. I think it was with her brother,
oh,
and it was numbers.
a number system.
Yeah, she did a She worked with a number system.
So scale degrees where
I
you
would say so.
okay.
Yeah, and she'd be gone for a week, and of course she was concertizing. Then she'd come. She was a regular at our deli.
Oh.
She came to our delicatessen.
So she lived
Saxon.
in
Yeah.
she lived in Borough Park.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She babysat me a couple of times
Okay.
as a little kid if my parents were away overnight somewhere or
Mhm.
something.
And so she would be off concertizing. Was she on a
She had
what
regular
circuit?
places where
where
she would concertize. She had a place in St. Louis that she always annually. I don't. That St. Louis is what I remember,
Mhm.
but I'm sure there were many other places
Mhm.
because they knew her. She had like a 15-minute show on EVD once a week,
Mhm.
as I remember, and she probably learned by ear.
Mhm.
I think probably Quarton was maybe her favorite
Oh.
because she did a lot of Quarton and did it very well.
Uh-huh. Did they go to the shul? Kvartner was the cantor at
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel, right? Did
Yeah,
they go to
I
Emmanuel?
never saw her in shul.
Okay.
Never.
Oh, I see.
We were dues-paying members at Bethel and Emmanuel
Mm-hmm.
because of the Khazente
Khazants,
brothers,
yeah.
and but also my father adored Rabbi Shore, and he adored Rabbi. I can't think of his name now at Emmanuel, but
Okay.
he was a wonderful man.
So you said you never saw her in shul. I
I
mean,
never saw her in
she
shul.
was
I
in,
saw her at the deli a lot,
uh
a couple of times a week.
Do you think she learned her chazanas mostly from records?
I would say so. I would say so. But boy, she had a mouth. She had a moil. She had a wonderful mouth and a terrific coloratura, and terrific use of her chest voice, obviously. But she would sometimes go into head. She had a beautiful voice, just beautiful. And I remember her as a beautiful woman. I always thought she was beautiful, and so she would babysit. She and her husband Jack. I think it was Jack Schwartz. Was it, I think he might have been in like a furrier or something like that, and he had some sort of an accident, and I don't think it was in an army accident, but he only had one leg.
Oh,
He
okay.
had a wooden leg,
Interesting. Okay.
and about 4 o'clock in the morning, I was sleeping in the living room, and there was a staircase going up to the bedroom or bedrooms. Then off the living room was a kitchen. I hear a clump, 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 clump. It's Jack going down the stairs. And I didn't say I was awake or anything. And he went into the kitchen. He opened the fridge and he poured a glass of orange juice into the glass and closed the fridge, left it on the table, and clump, 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 he walked back up. So about 9 o'clock the next morning, we like had breakfast. And the reason for it was Perele wanted her orange juice room temperature. So she sent her poor husband with one leg.
Well, that's lovely. He cared for her.
He did. He was a nice man, a handsome man. I could show you him.
Oh, I would love to see. Again, you're presenting quite a different image than Gaina and Bianca, because they accentuated that he was very small, slight of stature. And they talked a lot about how they didn't present her as being a beautiful woman. Let's say I'll put it that way.
Well, she was wide. I mean, she was built like a linebacker.
Right, she was a big person.
Yeah, and but still, her face I thought was beautiful, and she spoke in a very kind way. We had all kinds of cantorial people. Yossel Boss used to come to our deli. He had no teeth, and so my father had to cut the rye bread, cut the crust off, and he used to have what is it, brisket, breast of beef, we called it, breast of beef, and he would come and his speaking voice was lower than the piano. I mean, it was beyond belief.
Right.
And ringlets, he had these tremendous head of hair. And
how did your parents know these people? How did they know Perele?
I don't know how it happened. I don't know.
Did they know about her from her radio show? Were they fans? Is that kind of how they got to be friendly?
I wish I knew what the how they met, but I don't know.
They were close enough that they asked her to
she was like, there was a circle of friends. There was this guy Izzy Goldstein. He was a clown. He was a completely outrageous human being. Izzy and his wife Magda. Magda was a blonde bombshell, Swedish origin. No, excuse me, Hungarian.
Okay, yeah.
She was
Jewish
Hungarian,
Swedish.
and she was something. And so you'd ask Izzy, he'd be walking alone on Shabbos. He says, "Where's Magda?" She says, "I tied her to the bed." He would say stuff like that. I don't know if you need to know these stories, but Izzy Goldstein, he was the clown jester. He'd make Perele laugh, and he'd make fun of her, and everybody took it. I mean, Rabbi Shor, he would say the most outrageous things to Rabbi Shor, and he would just laugh his head off. When I had my first Afruf, Nishtar Kanim Gedacht, for my first marriage, Moshe Stern was the Chazan, and I'm sitting there with my father, and Izzy Goldstein was sitting in the front on the right side where the seats faced. Most people were here was the bima. Most people like this. On the right side, they were facing this right in the front. We're sitting there, and I'm closer to the wall, and I had to get through Izzy Goldstein in order to get to do the Haftorah. He gives me a big Yamod, a Chazan. I think I was all of 19 or 18. I had to have my father's signature in order to get a blood test to be married. And he calls me Yamod, and I start to go out of the seat, and Izzy gooses me. He grabs me. Where? He won't let me go. And Rabbi Shor goes like this, and I point at Izzy, and he goes, "Oh," he goes, "I understand." And we this circle of people, Perele, Jack, and Izzy and Magda and Tibby and Louie, my parents, and hung out together, and they would go places and go. They would go to the theater, and stuff like that. And they would come to the deli in kibbutz. And my mother was a tremendous kibbutzer. People, she was a magnet. People wanted to be near her. It was my mother that brought these people because she was kind of nuts. You know, she was violent. She hit, big hitting, and it was my job to keep her happy so I didn't get hit. And that's how I became a servant of the people. I always got along with rabbis, with people in my life, because I looked for ways to make them happy, which I learned as a kid. And so I totally went off the track there. But so Perele was in the circle of friends, and we would sit in the back. There was a special table for the family, and in that table, we would put a cover and have a little milchix, like a cheese Danish, a cup of coffee, and like that, and that was only for the family. I mean, we would all sit around. The tables were tables of 3 and 3, six people. We all hang around and you could, when Buckchester would come, and he came pretty often too, there was tension, between them, and Izzy Goldstein would make fun of it, actually. He said, he would say things, I don't know, what the hell's wrong with you two guys, or something like that.
Did you see her husband Jack involved in that tension, or was he?
No. Jack was the Khazente of the Khazente. He took care of Perele, and
now in terms of Buckchester, did he have this kind of acrimonious relationship with other people that you knew?
Not really. I once saw a yelling match outside of Bethel. It was a chag, and he came clean shaven. And there was a guy who was the Chazan Sheni at Emmanuel. His name was Neymark, and his son Robert Neymark was one of my circle of friends, and from Eitz Chaim Yeshiva, and you could see that he had just shaved. And Neymark started screaming at him, and Buckchester screamed back. It was, but other than that, the two, they were both Perele. They were both divas.
Do you think that
there was probably some jealousy,
some professional issues, maybe?
Yeah.
In terms of like turf around their performance circuit?
Well, I could see Buckchester feeling inadequate because Buckchester in the sukkah, they'd ask him to sing. So I don't know, he would sing. He had a huge voice, humongous. Baruch ne'im oshitay u'lemelech elichai v'kayom u'zemiroi shoymeiru. And he shot his load, and he'd finish it, and then go into falsetto. He had a fabulous falsetto, and he would finish the piece, and Izzy Goldstein would kill him. He says, "What's the matter, Bogey? You can't." For some reason, Robert and Gaynor called him Buggy, which makes more sense.
Sure.
Buckchester, Some reason we called him Bogey.
Okay. Yeah.
Like Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
And we, about Bogey, I could tell you stories till the cows come home.
So Bogey, you studied with him.
Starting at age 11.
Right. Robert mentioned that you guys were really close.
Yeah.
But in terms of, so you were going to say that you were going to contrast his performance with Perele's.
Right. Perele, never had a problem getting through anything. I remember another thing, in 1960, she used to drive a silver, she always wore gloves when she drove, and she drove a silver Chrysler, 8 cylinders, no power steering. Back in the, she drove, as Gentroff would say about his wife Peggy. Peggy, she drives like a man, and that's Perele. she didn't that she maneuvered that wheel, could park it, with no power steering.
Right.
So she took me to Madison Square Garden to hear the 100th anniversary concert of the Khazente, the famous concert,
Yeah.
where Barkin completely. I thought he got more applause than even than Moshe did. David sang something that they weren't familiar with, so they didn't give him props too much. He sang the Ad Hashem Morabu Tsarai that Buckchester wrote for him, and it was a big choral piece. It was a good piece, and there were high notes, was what the Jews wanted, and all, but it wasn't familiar to them. He got great applause. Moshe sang his Eilu Devarim and got huge applause, and Barkin came out and sang the Reutman, Racham Avakol Banecha, and it was a destruction. I mean, they were tearing the seats apart. He was new, they never heard of him. He was, whether he was in Detroit or Holy Blossom in Toronto, or he was out there. He would go from he was like he was a gun, a hired gun. He never did any teaching or anything like that. He would just go where they wanted a voice in the days when some shuls wanted a voice, and that's what he filled. He had every right to be in the Metropolitan Opera, and I know he was considered by Bing at one point, but that's another subject. But that was the night that Barkin and Buckchester warned me. Bogey says, "Watch for Barkin." He told me, "Watch for Barkin," and it happened. It was fantastic. And Perele, we were in the nosebleed seats in the garden.
Right.
We were in the balcony, and Ed Sullivan was the MC.
Really? Wow.
And he wore his blue shirt for television. You always had to wear a blue shirt for television for some reason. And it was just Warner Bass conducted the orchestra. It was an orchestra, full orchestra. Oh, and they played that Reutman, that arrangement of the Binder piano part, from Koi Omar Hashem. His voice was so baritonal, and yet he went up so easily. This Barkin, B flats that were just penetrating and touching the sea on a run, and it was I just had a ball.
It sounds like it.
And then she took me on the way home. She took me to the famous dairy restaurant on 13th Avenue. I forgot what she ate, but I know what I ate. I always had it at the famous. I had it looked like dog food. It was like two round things, crusty, with a mushroom sauce. No, with caramelized onions above it. It was phenomenal.
That's amazing.
It was called. I'll think of it later. It wasn't. It wasn't a cutlet. They used to have vegetarian cutlets in those dairy restaurants. It was something else. And it's killing me that I can't remember. I can't remember anything these days.
You remember a lot, actually.
But
okay.
Well, yeah. Another thing, when I was in Florida.
Well, 1 second. This Chazonis Farban concert, how did she feel about not being included? I mean, did that even come up for
Perele?
Yeah.
Didn't come up.
Right.
She didn't. She obviously wasn't upset. She wanted to see it.
Right.
Right.
Did she ever talk about? Do you remember her ever talking about her feelings about her place in the cantorial world?
I wouldn't say I was afraid of her, but I was young, and she was a diva,
right.
And she carried herself that way.
So say a little bit more about that. How did that express itself?
Well, the way she would dress, never dressed in a casual way, and always wore heels. And the way she held her head, it was as if she was conducting a seminar when you spoke to her. And a lot of the affectations of tenor chazanim, you know, getting in touch with her voice.
Right.
The instrument, like Sidney Shikoff would go, hello, are you there?
Right.
And, and so on. Charlie Block used to wake up. He'd set an alarm to wake himself up at 2 a.m. and sing a high C to prove to himself that he could after a dead sleep.
Okay.
So Chazanim, they were nuts, and
Right.
my brother had terrible vocal tics. His big one was yeah, to try to get that forward thing.
Yes.
And Buckchester he advocated humming. Says to feel it in the teeth. He wanted me to feel it in my teeth. Says always hum, Jackie, on the way to shul. You hum. This is good. And Perele, he obviously couldn't teach her anything, and maybe that disturbed him. I don't know. Maybe she didn't give him props. Izzy Goldstein used to make fun of him. He says, you wrote one piece, habait. Big deal, one piece, habait. All you do is, Kusi sings habait, and he asks you to get up and bow, and that's your life. He was sort of like, what's his name, the great comedian who passed away last year or 2 years ago, the insult comedian.
Yeah.
So he was like that. He would insult.
Right.
But he always knew that it didn't come from a mean place.
Right.
And he would laugh. Buckchester would laugh at it.
Right.
And I don't remember him ribbing Perele so much. Perele was an artist. That's how she carried herself. He might have, because he used to rib David Kosovitsky all the time. He would hound him before. We would hear David on Friday nights. He would daven twice a month, and he would daven Friday night and Shabbos with Moshe. He had it in his contract that he had to give 2 Friday nights a year.
Right.
And it was like he was doing you a favor,
Right.
Whereas David, whenever David davened Friday night, we were there, and Izzy Goldstein always knew what he was going to sing, and he used it. He says, Jackie Louie is going to sing Hashkivena. Watch this, and there it was. He sang his Kusevitsky Hashkivena that they both sang. I remember there was that phrase in there that they always sang the same Hashkiveno. And he would kid David around. Moshe, I don't know. I never saw him. I'm sure he probably did. He looked like Kozovitsky. He had that mustache, that thin mustache, and everything was chazanis there. Everybody loved everybody. The non-Jewish people loved it. The neighbors.
Were there other women besides Perele who were involved in the scene in that way as performers?
Well, yeah, I didn't know them. There was,
Right.
I think.
No, I mean in your scene. Yeah.
My scene, no.
Yeah. Okay.
You mean
the Borough Park scene?
You mean like a Perele?
Yeah.
Never knew of anyone.
No.
Never knew of anyone.
Or singers
And the
who
ones
were
that
less
I
well
heard,
known, or
the ones that I heard, like I heard Shandela. I think it was Shandela on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Okay.
I think which she sang. She would sing Alters Habeit, or she would sing Sheyibaneh. I never thought of her as I thought of Perele as a classical chazan. I thought of the other ones as borscht belt chazanim types, except for maybe Friedel Oischer, who really had every right to be a borscht belt, but she had the correct moves. She was like Perele. She had.
Okay.
I was in North Miami Beach from 72 to 76. So sometime during that period,
Mm-hmm.
Perele was in town,
Mm-hmm.
and my rabbi, by the name of Max Lifshitz, he was kind of an Ohev Chazanut.
Okay.
So under his rabbinate, I had brought Genshoff down for that Miami. It's on YouTube now. That
Oh, okay.
the Miami davening, and I had put the next year David Kosovitsky down.
Amazing.
And so I knew he liked it, and I said, Perele Feig's in town. He said, I'm not sure I know who that is. I said, do you know about the Khazentes from the 40s and 50s? He says, yeah, I never heard them. I said, she's one of them, to my mind, the best, you know. And he said, oh my God, well, we've got a men's club meeting coming up next Sunday, and we can do just word of mouth or something. And long story short, she came, and I sat at a keyboard, and she sang Elu Devorim, Rappaport, and it was pandemonium. They were screaming, these guys. Max Lifshitz almost fainted. He all he could say for the next month, Perele, 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 you know.
Right.
It was to hear her sing in person was magnetic. And you just sat there and wonder how she manipulated that sound to sound kind of like Quarton. And that's it. And the final story is about a week before she died, in Florida. I think
she was living down there at the time.
I guess so.
So you think she had emphysema?
I think she had emphysema.
Was she a heavy smoker?
Yeah, she smoked. And she had emphysema. And I went with my mother, and we sat, and she hadn't heard me sing since I was a child. And of course I didn't sing. At that time I invited her, I didn't sing anything. And I sat down at her bed and I sang the Genshoff Tomachti Yisedosai in a speaking register, and very low. You know, Tomachti Yisedosai. She started giving me hums and responses, and she cried, and she said, you've become a Chazan, Jackie. I'm so proud of you. And that was a beautiful memory of mine.
Yeah.
Last time I saw her, she passed away just a few days later.
Now, what about her family? Did she have any kids?
No, not. I asked my sister that specific question last night.
Was her husband still alive when she passed her?
I don't think so. No. I didn't see Jack in the hospital. I didn't see Jack when she sang at my shul. He must have passed away. I just don't have a memory of it.
Right.
And my sister's 91, but she didn't remember anything that I didn't remember. Anything of consequence.
And I take it that Perele never led davening anywhere.
No.
Right.
No.
Do you think surely she could have?
I'm not sure she needed to or wanted to.
Right.
I think she lived in an Orthodox world.
Right.
Whether she was totally Orthodox herself, she lived in that world.
Right.
And it's something that was beyond expectation in those days.
Right.
That didn't even become a hope until like around 1970.
Right. What about women just davening for each other? I mean, was that
unheard of to my mind?
Right.
I mean, the first HUC student, Barbara Ostfeld, or Barbara Herman was her married name. She got into school around 1968-69, and she had a very sweet voice, and she sounded okay. She didn't have the full, moves and stuff, but she sounded okay, and Alter liked her. specifically Alta liking her. And so he had an open mind, I guess, and she would sing straight tones. She was like a little waif, and which is very good for chazonas. You know, to sing off straight tones, and coloratura really works. Otherwise, it competes with the coloratura. You know, the vibrato competes with the coloratura. You know, and
even though, I mean, Perele has a lot of vibrato in her singing as well,
but not on coloratura.
No, she's but on her, when she's holding pitches, she's giving it all kinds of inflections.
Absolutely. And she does that ma thing
yes,
in the Yishtaba.
That's amazing, yeah.
She does the ma.
Right. Well, because it's not just a straight cover of the Chagi, right? It's a Chagi piece, right? I mean, but it doesn't sound like him. It sounds like her. I mean, she.
To me, she did sound like Quarton sometimes when she would sing of Yom Simchastam or something like that.
Well, she was kind of a Yiddishy Chazen, like Farton was. Like she was, I don't know. That's.
Alter when I graduated. The last thing I'm going to say to you is listen to Quarton. He was talking vocal reasons. Listen to Quarton, that free, wonderful, you know. It's kind of Zwischenfach between tenor and baritone. That was me.